All right, we're here to change strings the Jonel way.
The Jonel or Jonel?
Jonel, depends on how you're feeling. Okay. Hold this here.
Yes, sir.
This is a special finger. This is how we do this. We come around, we loop it. We give enough space for it to go by the second hole, because we're going to loop the other string around to hold the string in place. And as it tightens, it will basically stop it from moving, hopefully. And that will keep better tuning, possibly intonation. And the resonance will vibrate together with the strings through the strings, since they're connected as well with the bridge.
And it's starting with the E bass.
Low.
The low E. Hold on, let's turn it here. Real production. Oh, shoot, we gotta show them the top here. Hold on.
Where the fucking table will fall over.
Where the hell?
You find it?
All right. You gotta have fun while stringing your guitar.
Just say no.
No.
Okay, here we go. This up here, I have a very special way of tying this, literally tying. You've got all these other methods. I've tried them over the years, but this one I find to be the best. Just literally tie. Just loop it through that, but pointing inwards, because what we're going to do is wind the string over here.
Hey, this is live. This is live, folks.
Can you see that? It's tied in, and then we're going to cut the excess. And then we're going to wind it. And you want it to wind on the outside, going towards the peg. All the other strings, except the high E, the windings are going towards the center of the headstock. You want at least 3 winds for it to hold the tuning. Best. Hold on a second. Let's tighten this up a little bit. Excuse me. Okay, now we're going to do the next string. So what I was talking about before is having the string here. Let's see if we can get into this here to have this hold it in place. The second string hold in place, and we do that all the way down the line. So you want this one then to be there to be by the other hole, so when you put the string through, it grabs the other one. There we go, just like that. Now this one. You put it this way, because we're going to have the windings going towards the center as opposed to being on the outside like that.
Oops, cut it too short.
No, it's good.
Just kidding.
Good enough. Tighten it. So you got that tie there. Now we'll hold it in place as it tightens. It's better than all the other ways that are done. I've done them all. In my opinion, this holds it better, and it's just easier to do. You have quite a different variety of ways to put the strings on. Down at the bridge and the saddle, the way I have it for the first 3 bass strings, that's a common thing. You'll see a lot of guitar manufacturers put the strings on like that. Sometimes they'll wind them. I mean, they'll tie them with several loops, but this is the easiest way. Probably originally because the strings were just thick, and looping them around was kind of a pain in the butt. And it was easier to just do it this way. I've done it before, and I don't like it. I like it this way the best. Here we go. If you can see that there, same thing on this one. It's great. It's going to hold the string in place. So it's coming down. The loop is coming from the bottom up around like that. And you tighten it, and then you want this part to be slightly over the edge there, where it actually ties and kind of locks the string into place. And we do the same thing here. Tie it like that and tighten it up. Some strings, they're thinner wound here for various ways to tune it. Some people with that thinner winding will utilize that here in the pegs, or they'll utilize it in the bridge. I've seen them done both ways. I personally don't like it. I would prefer string manufacturers not to do that, but it's there. Some of the best strings around actually have that, so you can't get away from it. They just do it as part of their tradition or whatever logical reason they do it, or maybe even cheaper, use less of the metal. These are copper plated with silver. Typical standard string, I'm sure you're probably familiar with. Then we wind it again, like the other string, the A, winding it towards the center of the headstock. So the high E is wound this way, but the 2 other ones are wound that way, because the high E coming off the nut going straight on, so there's no angle. Sometimes you'll see they'll miswind them. They'll have the windings going towards the center, and it's putting an angle this way. I don't like that. I think it screws with the intonation, and I just don't like it. I think it's unnecessary stress on the nut itself. I think the string just coming straight to it, winding is just a better way, period. So you got this going on with the windings there, this one with the windings there. Now the treble strings, you're going to have them go this way, and then the high E will be going that way on that side. Same concept. So the string comes straight on to the peg from the nut. Now, with the treble strings, we do a slightly different method down here at the bridge. What I do, obviously the same thing, one to come underneath to lock the string in place. But the other ones we went this way, down and around and put it in place. This one we're going to do opposite. We go like this, the opposite way. We put it through 1, 2 times this way, put it there, slightly over the next hole, so the string grabs it and locks it in place. Looks like there's a little excess here. You can either cut it off, or you can just kind of pull it. Like that. And you want the previous string to be underneath the one at the peg. So this one is below the low E, excess string is below the A is below the D is below the G, and so on. The B will be on top of it, and the G will be below that one, and the high E obviously there. Now up here, I advise this because nylon is actually a very slippery material, and it slips up here. And one of the best ways to have it not slip is to tie it like we did before with the other strings. Just tie it, but then put a knot that'll act as a form of a stopper. So you can either, depending on your strings, your gauges, their tensions, you could either try to make the knot and push it towards the string. So as you wind this and tighten this, the knot will come to the tie and just stop. It'll stop it and hold it in place. And then the strings will stretch. In my opinion, sometimes actually the knot will be up there and it won't get down to the wind. You can kind of pull on it to get it there, or you could leave it. Sometimes it'll just settle after a while once you tune it. Either way, I tend to most of the time prefer to have it literally go to it, because once it gets there, it will go no further. So the rest of the time you have these strings on your guitar, they'll just stretch. So you will always have stretching of strings. So you won't have stretching of strings as well as movement up here, which will help it keep it in tune better, even though you will tune it constantly. But in general, you'll have less slippage then because of the knot stopping it here. So it'll help it a little bit in the long run, especially once the strings stretch and stabilize. Your tunings will hold better. So we cut it off, and then you got that knot there. I'll try to pull it. Let's see. Either way, as you wind this and tighten it and bring it to pitch, it should go there. If it doesn't, you can leave it. It'll eventually get pulled and lock in place. But that's one of the differences, the way I do the strings. So they all have a tie, but the treble all have knots in it as a stopper to stop it. And in my opinion and my experience, it works the best. This is, for me, the best way to do this. I know there's a lot of different ways. They're all good. I mean, but if you want to learn a new way, or at least try and experiment with my way, and do it. I don't know if anybody else does it. So far, I'm the only person I know that does it this way. Or some people may incorporate some elements, like obviously the way the bass strings are wound. Some people might do that, but don't do the other things down there. So, but this is, in my opinion, the best way to do it. I've been playing for a long time and changed classical strings and for a long time. And like I said, I've tried pretty much all the basic, common, well-known ways of luthiers, string manufacturers, guitar techs. Now I do, with the B and the high E, I put a knot down here with the same principle of the knot down there to act as a stopper. One time I was using fluorocarbon strings down here on a very expensive guitar, and the fluorocarbon is very high tension, much, much higher tension than nylon, and it slipped here and actually created string burn here, a gouge in the soundboard. And because of that, I developed the knot here, because you either can use the string type beads, or they'll put a little piece of plasticky material, sort of the pick guard material you'll see on flamenco guitars down here for that. But I'm like, I don't want to add that to the guitar. I think just having a knot, or if you use the beads or some kind of stopper, works just as good. And with that, because of that experience, even though you're on your average nylon string, the B is probably one of the least tense strings. Generally, they probably would not slip. But I do this anyways, just out of habit and routine. I'm kind of so used to visually doing it, I like it. So you got the two ties like we did with the G, but you got the knot here, and I extend it out. So when you put the high E, it may or may not pull here. If you're using fluorocarbon strings, it will pull. It'll get here. So will the high E with this type of knot. But this is the best way to prevent the string from slipping here and string burn, unless you do string beads, or if you got the the folk type strings that have beads in place. But if you don't, this is the way to do it in the best way. But I always give extra room. It's kind of like my little niche or trademark or whatever, with the two top treble strings extending out with a knot on it. In fact, with the high E, I let it hang lower, as you will see. So down here, same concept. We put the string in. And then we, this way, down, up and around, the string pointing that way. Got the tie, tighten it, leave some excess room to wind, create the knot up here, and then guide it down towards the peg. You may or may not get it all the way down. It's sort of irrelevant. It's in the center. May or may not rub on the edges, but it's, I do like I said, for it to get as close to the tie down there and actually act as a stopper. And eventually, with the tuning, it will pull it there. So here we cut the excess. You can wind, once again, like the G with the winds here, but the high E will be going the opposite direction. So just like this. And now finally the high E. Now with the high E, there's only one difference. Obviously with the low E, let's go over this, with the low bass strings. The wind, you put it and you loop it this way. You loop it this way, and then you keep the excess and have the next string come underneath and loop it and hold it in place, so you get this effect going down the line. The treble strings, you loop it, the two treble strings, the G and the B, you loop it twice like that. Now with the high E, there's a difference. Once again, it comes in like that. The high E, I loop 3 times. These two treble strings, it's 2 loops going around. But the high E being the most tense, I tend to do it 1, 2, 3. So you get that effect down there. And you pull, and then you create the knot up here as the stopper. But generally, unless they're fluorocarbon or the Nylon gut, which are way, way extra hard tension, they will pull towards the tie, and the stopper will act. On nylon strings, they tend not to, because they're just not as tense. That's one of the secrets of these strings. Nylon gut and fluorocarbon are just pretty much ultra high tension strings. So I generally, with the high E, I like to leave an excess amount. Once again, because of that string burn experience, and I've seen string burn on a lot of used classical guitars, because the guy, professionals, you'll have a $10,000 guitar with string burn here, because obviously the owner, the player, he might be a great guitarist, but he doesn't know how to do his strings properly, especially, or understand the tension of it, and it'll slip, especially the high E at least, will slip. So this prevents the slippage. So I leave excess string, have a knot, even if it does get pulled there, especially with the fluorocarbon or Nylon gut, but it's a safe measure. But I'm so used to seeing this, to me, it kind of looks pretty. So but remember the 3 loops there. So the G and the G and the B, 2 loops. The bass strings, 1 loop the other way, and they come around holding in place. So that's the difference. Now up here, same concept down there. You put it through. You put it through, and like the other ones, the other treble strings, you had the tie going this way because you want that facing that way as the winds go this way towards the center. With the high E, it's opposite. You want the tie pointing towards the center, the headstock. And I do, instead of 1 loop around, I do 2 up here with the same idea as down by the bridge. Because it's a higher tension string, I wanted 3 ties on the high E for slippage purposes once it locks into place, etc. It just will prevent it from slipping at both ends, because the nylon strings nylon in general is just a very slick material. It's naturally like that. And it slips. So it'll slip there and here. And that's where the tuning problems arise. It'll slip at the bridge and it'll slip at the peg. So if you put the knot, for one, the 3 ties at both ends and with a knot at both ends, if it locks into place, or if it's a high tension string like the fluorocarbon or the Nile gut, they will come to the tie or the wind and will lock into place. So that's a preventive measure, and it will help tuning, period. So once again, up here you got the knot. You could guide it down. With the high E, generally gets pulled because of its tension, since generally the high E is probably the most tense. On your average string set and average nylon set, usually your high E is the most tense, or your D and your A. Some of the newer gauges you'll see with the titanium strings, generally the high E and the low E are one of the most tense. So it's kind of a different thing. But with an average nylon set, that's how they are. So here you got the tie there, 3 ties, 3 loops at both ends. And then with this one, you want the winds going towards the outside, going towards the peg that way, or to the edge of the headstock. Why? Because the string comes off the nut, guided straight into position. You don't want it that angle. That angle, it may or may not affect depending on the nut itself, but it's just better. I mean, it's just a better habit, in my opinion, for the string, and it makes more logical sense for it to just come straight on. So that's the thing. Your 2 edge strings, the windings are on the outside. The 2 sets of inner strings for the bass and the treble the windings are on the inside, coming onto the peg. I know it's a lot of details compared to an average way to put classical strings on, and it's a pain in the butt or whatever. I get it, I know, but you know, if you're looking to reduce tuning problems, you will never completely eliminate them, because guitars in general, I don't care if you got the most expensive guitar on earth, all guitars, electric and classical, they just constantly need to be tuned. That's just the way it is. It's not the string. There's no such thing as like the strings are bad and won't stay in tune. That's BS. It's simply, that's what guitars do. All guitars do that. And all experienced guitarists know this. No string, no matter how much you pay for it, no guitar, how much you pay for it, will eliminate those problems between the string or the peg. It has nothing to do with that. It's the guitar in general. You're dealing with strings that stretch, pull, slip, etc. So all these concepts are to reduce that. Will you eliminate them 100%? No. The knots will at least lock them in place, and then they'll just stretch. If you don't have the knots in place as stoppers, they will slip as they slip down there. And I'm sure any experienced guitar players has seen string burn at the bridge on the soundboard. Some guys will get rid of the guitar when that happens. Not that it doesn't function well, it's just it doesn't look good, or they can't accept it on their very expensive guitar.
What kind of guitar is that?
This is the Garcia grade number 3 with the walnut back and sides. They call it the Spanish pine, but I believe it's a cedar. It may be some type of different pine, but a lot of people say it's a cedar. So, and this is already, it's a 660 scale length, so it's a longer scale length guitar as it is, so it will be more high tension than a 650 scale length. So you're already dealing with a slightly higher tension on this. So, the Garcias, the Hernandez, which were based on Ramirez guitars. The early Ramirez's were anywhere from 660 to 664. There was some flamenco guitar, I forget which one, that was 670. So these longer scale lengths, what they do is produce higher tension. That's one of the reasons they use them, because they think it'll make it louder. So, but you know, yeah, theoretically and technically it does make it louder. If, say you're using, these are just Pro Arte EJ45s, a typical normal string. If you use a Pro Arte on a 660 or longer scale length, it will be tighter than on a 650 or lower scale length. Basically, not exactly, may not be the exact tension, but the EJ45 or a normal tension string on a longer scale length on a 660 may feel closer and resemble a high tension string like the EJ46 or more, or the EJ44. So that's one of the reasons why they make the longer scale lengths. But with this longer scale length or higher tension or going to the fluorocarbon, which are definitely higher tension, the mysteries and secrets of fluorocarbon or Nile gut or any other monofilament that you hear people talk about how much louder or brighter it is. The only reason it is louder or brighter is because the string is denser material. Generally, they're thinner, but they produce a higher tension because of that density. So like, let's see, with this EJ45, they have they measured it, the Dario measured it on actually, it says right on there, on a 25.5 inch guitar, which is 648 millimeters. It's not even a 650. It's 2 millimeters shorter than an average classical that you will see. But they have the pounds at 16.23 and as kilograms at 7.36. But with the longer scale guitar being 660, this is going to be higher. This is probably at least now within the 17 range, possibly even the 18-pound range. The height of the bridge, the saddle on the bridge will also affect the tension. If you have a higher sitting saddle and the strings are higher from the fretboard, that produces a higher tension as well. So these ideas of knots and tying and the string holding is because of that. The tensions will pull. So the knots will act as stoppers if they get pulled down. On a fluorocarbon string, I've seen it as a regular thing on guitars I've had them on. These knots, no matter how far they are away from the tie, will get pulled, maybe even over a couple week period. You'll see them just slightly, every time you tune and play, they'll just slightly pull, and then they will lock in place. That's the point when you'll get the string burn. Some guys will put a high tension string or a fluorocarbon or a nail gut or whatever, and they don't have nothing like this. They don't have the tap plate material down here, the plastic, or they don't have a bead. They'll just tune it, they'll play it, they'll tune it, they'll play it every time, or professionals, they'll sit it in their case, and then one day they'll go to play the guitar, pull it out, and the string broke, or the string slipped. That happens in the case. That'll happen overnight or whatever. So and it'll slip here, and then you'll get that string burn. So this is to prevent that. This will prevent damage on especially expensive guitars. So that's why. So it's to eliminate, this is all to eliminate slippage, to hold a better tuning. They will always slip, they will always stretch, but it'll reduce it. So, and when you tune, one of the ways I tune is you start with the high E. You tune the high E first. Then you do the B and you go down. So you go from 1 to 6 as they are numbered. So you go from high strings to the low strings. Why? Because they will, the first high E will tighten on the B. Hello, Kitty. He's here for the tuning and for to learn how to do this. So the first one, you do the high E because it's the highest one, and then it tightens on the B. Then you tighten the B and it tightens on the G, and so on. And every time you tune, you go from high to low, so that it tightens it. And then as you're tuning, whether there's slippage or stretch or whatever, it's on there. So it's a more rational, logical way. It's trying to take a slightly intellectual method to this. So all these things are a reason. They're not done just because I like it. So they're actually done for legitimate, what appears to be logical reason. It works for me. This is how I prefer to do it. I've tried a variety of ways to put strings on classical guitar, which is more of a pain in the ass than electric or standard acoustics with the ball ends and whatnot, and the pegs are sitting up, and just the whole thing. The classical guitar in general, you're dealing with different materials. They stretch. Nylon especially, it's a very stretchy material. So you just want to reduce everything, slippage, stretching, blah, blah, blah. But this is how I do it, and thank you for watching the video.